Manchester, 2018. Emergency services rushed to the Britannia Hotel following reports from witnesses of a shocking incident.
There's some workmen working outside of the hotel on the street quite early in the morning, getting ready to start a day's work. All of a sudden, from the 5th floor, they see a man throw himself out of the 5th floor window onto the street below.
Initially, like any other awful scene like that, you think, what's happened? Is it a suicide?
But what initially seems like a tragic incident of suicide soon reveals itself to be something far more sinister.
An individual has struck him heavily and with sustained force multiple times on the back of his head. There are no defence wounds. This was a surprise attack.
Alcohol is involved, drugs also involved. It can cause anxiety, paranoia, nobody thinking entirely rationally.
This is the story of one of the most tragic and unforeseen hotel murders ever in Britain.
We can speculate all around the houses and we will never know what happened in that hotel room.
Manchester is a lively city located in the northwest of England.
Well, Manchester is a very vibrant and busy town centre. It's second only to London itself, so it's full of nightclubs and bars and places that tourism attracts. So it's very, very busy.
Manchester is a vibrant and very multicultural city in the northwest of England. It's got a rich industrial heritage dating back several centuries, and now it's a very populous area, and it centres really on a thriving city centre. You've got two big football teams, Manchester City and Manchester United, so that'll be familiar to lots and lots of people. And then you've got cultural venues, music and arts and things like that, as well as lots of universities and university students.
Well, it might be a bit of a debate with Birmingham to say Manchester is second to London, but only in size, but also in things like trouble and things like the murder rate and everything else. Manchester is a tough place to work as a police officer. I've got a lot of colleagues up there. And like London, it'll have its areas whereby you wouldn't want to walk at night, but it is a metropolitan city. It'll have all the issues just the same as London, and it tends to be, over the years, people think everything gets concentrated to London, when in fact it doesn't.
The crime level in Manchester is pretty typical of a big city, so of course we do have our problems. We have around 50 homicides a year, but that doesn't make us any worse from any of the other big cities really, and certainly a much safer place to be than London.
Manchester would have a fairly high level of crime, being a city centre. Similar to London really, it suffers from similar crimes of violence and thefts and antisocial behaviour, the sort of things that you would normally associate with busy nighttime economies where people are out clubbing and partying through the evening.
The city is frequented by 29-year-old Tom Noakes, a kind and caring insurance worker who lives with his family in nearby Salford.
Tom Noakes came from a loving family. He came out as gay when he was 19. He had a successful career and a wide social group of friends. He was successfully working as a customer service manager at one of the biggest employers in Manchester, a big insurance company. He had a team working with him and under him, and he had a wide circle of friends. He knew all the best places to go. He was going to clubs, he was going to parties, but he was a really good, solid, decent guy. He was well loved by friends and family.
Tom Noakes was 29 years old and he was a customer service manager for an insurance firm. He was described by his family as a kind of a larger-than-life and very loving individual, one of 4 siblings, very close to his mother, still lived at home with her in Eccles in Salford, just on the outskirts of Manchester itself. A very popular, very well-liked and very kind of charismatic chap. Tom had come out as gay as a teenager, and his family and whatever were very supportive of him. He was comfortable in his own skin, if you like.
He was young, single, and loving life. So he was happy, he was busy, and he was just a typical young man, really, who's enjoying himself, he's making a little bit of money, he can go out and have fun.
He was from Greater Manchester, Eccles in Salford, and he'd been familiar with best places to go in the city, lots of friends in the city. His life, nightlife and work life was all Manchester.
He was the life and soul of many parties and just a great chap, and he was very popular with his work colleagues. In fact, that was the evening they went out to celebrate a colleague's birthday.
It's the 25th of September, 2018, and Tom Noakes and some of his work colleagues go out in the city to celebrate a birthday. One of these work colleagues is 21-year-old Hayden Fitzpatrick.
So Tom and Hayden have gone out with colleagues, celebrating a birthday, celebrating payday as well. So we'll be in good spirits with money in their pockets, go out to various bars in Manchester, and then towards the end of the evening, Tom and Hayden break away from the group and decide they're going to carry on the evening.
People kind of drift off, as naturally happens during a night out, and it becomes a situation where Tom Noakes and Hayden Fitzpatrick are pretty much left by themselves as the kind of last two standing, if you like. And at about 1:40 the next morning, so early hours of the 26th of September, they booked into the Britannia Hotel. They booked a room there, room number 130. The Britannia Hotel is located on Portland Street in Manchester city centre. It's in a fairly prominent location. It's a former factory building, it's grade 2 listed, so it's quite prominent.
The Britannia Hotel in Manchester is a big hotel, 5 floors on Portland Street. Very busy because it's in the town centre, so it will attract a lot of tourism and local people and businesses. Hayden Fitzpatrick had booked the hotel room at the Britannia Hotel, and once in the room they then decided that they needed some more alcohol. And around about 1:45 now on the 26th of September 2018, both Tom and Hayden leave the hotel and go and buy what is actually a magnum of Prosecco, so a huge bottle of Prosecco to enjoy and carry on their partying through the evening. During the course of that evening as well, Tom sends a text message to his mum and says, look, I'm coming home, I won't be too long. And so of course there's no worry amongst the family at that point, and the two men are enjoying themselves and just carrying on what would be a really fun night for them. During the course of that evening, they start to try and find someone to supply them with some cocaine. Tom had gone onto a dating app, Grindr, to try and what is believed to obtain some cocaine that evening. And a man called Andreas arrived.
Tom had gone onto the social media dating app called Grindr, predominantly used by gay men. It does add to the questioning of, well, if it's a party, just the two of them in a hotel room, you've then got the addition of a third person.
As their night at the Britannia hotel room continues into the early hours of the morning, construction workers arrive on the back streets of the hotel to start their workday when they witness something horrific.
At 5:30 in the morning, there were workers outside the Britannia and they witnessed something that was shocking, to say the least.
Tom and Hayden are in room 130 on the first floor of the Britannia Hotel. And around about 5:30 in the morning now, there's some workmen working outside of the hotel on the street, quite early in the morning, getting ready to start a day's work. All of a sudden, from the 5th floor, they see a man throw himself out of the 5th floor window onto the street below.
Obviously, the emergency services were alerted at this point and attended the scene where they found a body.
The man who threw himself out of the 5th floor window had first used a fire extinguisher to smash the window itself before throwing himself out of the 5th floor window onto the street below in front of these workmen.
The man who jumped from the window is identified as 21-year-old Hayden Fitzpatrick.
Initially, like any other awful scene like that, you think, what's happened? Is it a suicide? Where have they jumped from? But obviously that was quite obvious when you look up and you see a great big gaping hole in a window. But of course he also had his room key in his pocket.
Hayden Fitzpatrick had broken a window on the 5th story of the hotel, and then he had thrown himself through the window, came plummeted down to earth. Of course, died in the process. He had chosen in that moment to kill himself.
As part of the procedure into the suicide investigation, police check the hotel room, where a shocking scene awaits them.
In order to complete their inquiries, they go upstairs to the first floor where he'd been staying and expect to probably find an empty room and some clues as to why this individual has decided to take their life. What confronts them is a horrifying scene.
But what begins as a suicide inquiry spirals into something a lot more sinister when crime scene investigations see what is behind the door to room 130 at the Britannia Hotel. Manchester, England. In the early hours of the 26th of September 2018, police are called to the Britannia Hotel after some workmen witness a man jump to his death from the 5th floor window. The deceased man is identified as 21-year-old insurance worker Hayden Fitzpatrick. Investigators find a key card in his pocket and decide to check the hotel room as part of the suicide inquiry.
The workmen obviously have seen something horrendous in front of them on that early hours of that morning, and so call the police immediately, as anybody else would do. And the police arrive and identify that the person that has thrown themselves out of the window is Hayden Fitzpatrick, and he is pronounced dead at the scene at that time. A search of the body to try and work out where he's come from, or in case anybody else might be lying injured or ill anywhere, they search him, and in the jeans pocket they find a key card for room 130 at the Britannia Hotel. The police immediately go to that room, and there they see Tom Noakes dead on a chair inside that room.
You've now got Tom Noakes, who's actually in a chair, not on the bed, not on the floor. He's actually in a chair. To the police, it was quite obvious that he was actually deceased.
The suicide inquiry has now expanded into a murder investigation.
What confronts them is a horrifying scene. It is immediately clear that he has been bludgeoned several times on the back of the head. His arms are by his side. He is facing forwards. It is a position where an individual has struck him heavily and with sustained force multiple times on the back of his head.
Crime scene analysts search the hotel room and quickly identify what they believe to be the murder weapon.
When the police entered room 130 at the Britannia Hotel and saw Tom Noakes dead on the chair, they could immediately see that he had several very, very serious head injuries. And close by him was the magnum of Prosecco that the two men had bought earlier in the evening, which was heavily bloodstained. And of course, at that time, the police would be looking for that murder weapon. And without anything else obvious at the time, then it was believed that this magnum of Prosecco was indeed the murder weapon used to kill Tom Noakes.
And maybe there might have been a violent confrontation. Fists might have been used towards Tom if that Prosecco bottle hadn't have been there. But unfortunately it was. It's such a heavy bottle as well. It can inflict such, and did inflict, such damage. The bottle on the bedside table wasn't broken. This is a big, heavy bottle, and it's been used to hit Tom 5 or 6 times, but still it's not broken. You can imagine, what this bottle is capable of. And had it been a smaller bottle, maybe the damage to Tom wouldn't have been as bad. Who knows?
The murder weapon is an oversized bottle of Prosecco, and it is clear that Mr. Noakes had not been given any opportunity to defend himself.
To confirm their suspicions that Tom died without being able to defend himself, his body is taken to the coroner, who will carry out an autopsy, which will hopefully reveal more information about his death.
It later transpired in the post-mortem that Tom had been hit at least 6 times and died of what would be called blunt force trauma, which had then been so severe and injured his head so badly that he died as a result. But what the post-mortem couldn't find was any form of defensive wounds at all on Tom. For people like myself who have investigated these kind of things, looks like, well, has he had the opportunity to even defend himself? Was this a surprise to him, or was he in a state where he was unable to defend himself?
This was an unprovoked attack, and he wasn't able to actually defend himself. What does that tell us? In some ways, it helps the family understand that despite the awful death of their son and uncle, it may have been that he was knocked unconscious or even killed by the first blow, that he wasn't then able to actually move or put his hands up to defend himself. So it certainly was an unprovoked attack, in which case Tom hadn't been able to defend himself at all.
It was ascertained that Tom was in the chair when the attack took place. And that would be done through things like the blood patterns around the chair and the item used, which they believed was the magnum of Prosecco. When you don't have any defensive wounds, as Tom didn't, then that would indicate that this was kind of a surprise, or he was in a situation where the ferocity of the attack perhaps gave him no opportunity to defend himself. So it could have been very easily a very big surprise for him that this was happening.
Before police can make assumptions on what happened this fateful night, they speak to the people in the neighbouring rooms in the Britannia Hotel, in the hopes they might have seen or heard anything.
In the course of their inquiries, police spoke to somebody staying in the adjacent room, number 132, and the person in room 132 described hearing a sound as though somebody was hitting a basketball. They described it 6 or 7 times, kind of dull thuds. They also described hearing the sound of someone talking to themselves.
When they spoke to the room next door and in the hotel, they remembered hearing loud banging, described at the time as like a cricket bat or a baseball bat hitting the actual wall, about 5 or 6 heavy blows. That was the sound it made.
As police gather their evidence and identify suspects, they begin by searching for the man known as Andreas, who joined Tom and Hayden in the hotel room after they contacted him via the popular dating app, Grindr.
When you find a dead body in a hotel room, the first people that you want to question are the people who were last in that hotel room. Hayden Fitzpatrick had been in that hotel room right up to the moment of Tom Noakes dying. There was another individual that had been in the hotel room earlier on.
During the early hours of that day, on the 26th, Tom had also gone onto the app Grindr and been in contact with a man calling himself Andreas. Now, it's likely that Andreas was the person that ended up supplying them cocaine. And Andreas is said to arrive at the hotel around about 3:30 in the morning. So Tom and Hayden are still partying away at that time. And Andreas is then seen to leave about an hour later, so around about 4:30 in the morning.
It was clear from CCTV and other witnesses that that individual, this Andreas character that they'd met on a dating app, had been and gone before that event happened. There was no evidence, both DNA, CCTV witnesses, anything to suggest anyone had been in that hotel room. And also, let's be clear, this was very early in the morning. This wasn't sort of midnight when lots of people were moving around, coming back from big nights out. This was very early in the morning. It was quiet. It was pretty much daylight outside when this horrifying murder occurred.
He was there for just under an hour, really, and he left at a time, so we know that both were alive. And you've got that situation that who did he spend that time with? And you'd presume it was Tom, because Tom was on Grindr, and Tom had actually invited him over to the hotel. And Andreas, he turned up, spent that time with Tom and with the two of them, and then left, leaving them both alive.
When the police look at suspects for who has killed Tom Noakes at that time, obviously they have 2 people which are their front runners, essentially. They're suspects. The first one being Andreas, who came to the hotel in the early hours of the 26th. Now, in order to eliminate Andreas, firstly would be to identify who he is and then trace his movements from the time that you knew that Tom was alive. So you look at Tom's movements on that day and say, when was the last time we can say he was alive? And the police were convinced in their investigation that Tom was alive around about 4:45 at least in that morning. But what they can also say is that Andreas left via CCTV. They could see at least 15 minutes before that, leaving Hayden and Tom alone together, with no other persons who they knew of being in that room.
Police get in contact with Andreas, who confirms their suspicions that the 2 men were alive when he departed the hotel room, and he is ruled out as a suspect. Investigators now believe this case to be a murder-suicide.
We know both Tom and Hayden had asked for cocaine, had a large amount of alcohol with them. When someone mixes the two of those together, it can have different effects on different people. Some people become extremely violent and some people can become completely incapacitated, essentially, and almost fall asleep. In this case, if you think that there's two people who are taking cocaine, drinking a lot of alcohol, how they react to it in that situation, is the result of what we've seen.
This is the early hours of the morning, and what we do know is that alcohol is involved, drugs also involved, so possibly nobody thinking entirely rationally. So the effects of alcohol and cocaine can be anything. They can be extreme confidence, but also it can cause anxiety, paranoia, restlessness, excess energy.
But what happened after Andreas left? Did Hayden Fitzpatrick really murder his friend and colleague, Tom Noakes, before choosing to leap to his death? Police are determined to unravel every clue from that hotel room in a desperate bid to uncover why. Manchester, England. In the early hours of the 26th of September 2018, police are called to the Britannia Hotel after some workmen witness a man jump to his death from the 5th-storey window. The body is identified as that of 21-year-old Hayden Fitzpatrick. Their investigation leads them to his hotel room, where they discover the body of Hayden's colleague, 29-year-old Tom Noakes. While police work on establishing the motive for the two deaths, they must inform next of kin.
Tom's family were understandably shocked and devastated. Tom had messaged his mother at around midnight saying that he would be back home, and it was only when his mother woke up in the morning that she looked in and saw his bed hadn't been slept in that she realised that he hadn't actually arrived home. And very tragically, she actually saw on the internet, on the news from the Manchester Evening News, that there had been two men's bodies discovered at the Britannia Hotel, and she said, with that kind of mother's instinct, mother's intuition, if you like, she believed immediately one of them to be Tom. What an utterly tragic way to find out that something so terrible had happened.
What Tom's mum was able to say, what a loving uncle, son he was, and will be immensely missed by everybody.
Tragically, investigators learn that Noakes had not originally intended to stay at the hotel with Fitzpatrick.
Tom's last message to his mother around midnight to say that he would be coming home from this night out. So whether he ever intended even to stay in this hotel at all, or whether he'd simply gone back there before planning to get a taxi or head back to his home some other way, we'll never quite be sure.
To get a better understanding of the situation, police learn all they can about Hayden Fitzpatrick.
Hayden Fitzpatrick and Tom Noakes both worked together at this big insurance company. Hayden was 21, he worked there a few years. Tom was 29, and I think that the age difference and Tom's seniority, and he was more gregarious, a bit chattier. Tom created a sort of push-pull in their relationship, I think. Hayden perhaps either had feelings for Tom or very much looked up to Tom.
This is where we get a lot of information from Tom's mother. It does seem as if Hayden was quite infatuated. That may be because of wanting a relationship with Tom. That's what Tom sort of expressed to his mother, at least, that there was a lot of attention there from Hayden, but of course wasn't reciprocated back by Tom. So they were work colleagues, but I do believe that Hayden possibly wanted more.
There was no suggestion of any romantic connection between Tom Noakes and Hayden Fitzpatrick. Indeed, Tom Noakes' mother had said that very much was the case that Tom didn't fancy Hayden, that Hayden he had been described as kind of clingy and a bit overbearing, and she said wouldn't take no for an answer. So there may have been some interest on Hayden Fitzpatrick's side, but certainly not from Tom Noakes.
There's nothing to say that Tom fancied Fitzpatrick. In fact, he was annoyed by Fitzpatrick on occasion, so he wouldn't have been the first choice. So no, there's absolutely nothing to say. Just because Tom was a gay man and they decided to go to a hotel together, I think that the intention was that they were going to drink, they were going to take drugs, they were maybe going to contact other people to come over and continue the party. There's no sexual relationship implied here.
Now, having key information about the relationship between the two men, police start to piece together what might have happened in their hotel room that night. As they are doing this, a vital piece of evidence is uncovered by the crime scene analysts.
The empty magnum of Prosecco, also being heavily bloodstained, had Hayden Fitzpatrick's fingerprints on as well. So they were fairly convinced at the time, with the fingerprints within the blood itself, that that was the murder weapon, and the person that used that murder weapon was Hayden Fitzpatrick.
It's hard to say definitively whether or not this was something premeditated or more opportunistic. The likelihood is that when the two men went out to buy a bottle of Prosecco in the early hours of the morning when checking into the hotel, that neither of them had any nefarious intent or intent to use it as a weapon. But obviously a bottle of that size, particularly once empty and once there to hand any kind of disagreement or dispute and somebody's sudden rush to anger, it's there and it is a weapon that can be used.
Tom was found sitting in a chair. He's fully clothed. There's no defensive wounds on him, but he has been beaten around the head. He's taken at least 5 or 6 blows around the head with a heavy object. And that heavy object, well, is sitting right there. It's not a smoking gun. It's a magnum bottle of Prosecco. It doesn't seem that there was a huge confrontation here, but something that Fitzpatrick was not happy about triggered him to attack Tom. And what that something is, we can only guess at, that has caused Fitzpatrick to feel intensely angry with Tom. And he's seen red. I mean, that kind of attack only happens in a peak of anger. This is unusual because, of course, it happens in a confined space of a hotel, a very, very nice hotel. It happens in the early hours of the morning, though, between two men. And actually, weekend arguments between men, I've seen numerous homicides as a result of this. But again, what is odd about it is the fact that Tom was in a sitting position, and of course it becomes not just a murder but a murder-suicide.
Detectives consider various theories as to why Fitzpatrick murdered Tom before taking his own life.
The coroner who dealt with the inquest for the death of Tom would have looked at all the evidence brought before them, and that evidence would obviously talk about a potential motive as to why Tom was dead and why Hayden believed to be the person that had killed him. But it was quite clear that within that information and all the evidence they had and all that things that the police had gathered and spoken to people, that the motive was still a mystery as to why Hayden would have turned on his friend in that way and killed him in that quite vicious manner. And of course then you look at what Hayden did afterwards, which is commit suicide. And of course, you know, that can be brought on by a number of things, as we know, but, you know, drug use, it can also be brought on by pure guilt about what you've just done and sheer panic. So of course they don't necessarily know exactly why it happened, and that's a very hard thing for a family to not understand why their son died in that way, what led Hayden Fitzpatrick to kill Tom Noakes.
I remember in my days as a detective, having worked on a number of homicides as well, you've then got the situation, why does somebody kill? And you've got that fear, you've got rage, you've got a violent type, and also the fact that you have got that influence through drugs and the cocaine. So, and the spurn, the jealousy comes into this. Could this easily have been simple case, he was so jealous that Tom had now a relationship off Grindr with a third party, that this jealousy, this rage just came upon him, and not being able to see sense, having had too much to drink, and also the effects of some substance like cocaine, that he then turned and did this unprovoked violent attack.
It's certainly a possibility that, you know, Tom Noakes had refused the advances, shall we say, of Hayden Fitzpatrick. I mean, when you look very chillingly at words that Tom Noakes' mother said when she was talking about Hayden Fitzpatrick, you know, saying that Tom had described him as somebody that liked attention and was a bit clingy, but she also said that he wasn't like somebody that liked having no said to him. Well, You could perhaps think that, you know, after several hours out together and checking into a hotel, Hayden Fitzpatrick maybe had some expectations that Tom Noakes didn't share, that the two of them would have some kind of romantic involvement. So it is possible, but unfortunately we'll probably never know exactly why this happened.
Investigators hope to uncover Hayden Fitzpatrick's motivations by searching his phone, but strangely, he had an encrypted phone that they are unable to access.
There's a number of phones you can now buy that will be encrypted, which basically means you cannot get into the messages at all. I know what you're thinking. Why would somebody buy an encrypted phone? Yes, you tend to think on the side of perhaps that's a bit sinister. Why would you do this? But in this day and age, with the amount of data that's actually taken by platforms, there's been a lot of talk over the past 8 years that really, is it fair? So a lot of people now will have encrypted phones because they don't want the possibility of actually having had their data taken, rather than perhaps eliminating or hiding evidence. All of the police forces in this day and age now can quite easily put any phone, put it onto a computer and take out all the messages, the pictures, the voicemails, etc. But you can now buy encrypted phones that guarantee that will not be the case, and that was it here. And then, of course, you've got the issue that would they really try and break that into that phone? There was no need, because there wasn't going to be a prosecution.
Police miraculously access a single text message from Hayden's phone that gives them an insight into his mindset that morning, if nothing else.
The one bit of evidence the police were able to gather forensically from Hayden's phone, because it was encrypted, was that message that he sent that said somewhere along the lines of, "This is going to reflect badly on me." Now, this was sent after the murder.
That may have something to do with what ultimately happened, but equally that could be related to something completely different. Probably we'll just never know.
For me, it sort of shows the state of mind he was in, because it doesn't really make much sense. What reflects badly? The murder, the night out, him committing suicide? I think this just shows this state of mind he was in, and then the next thing he's done is think, I've got to kill myself. And that's quite frightening, but it just shows what was sort of going on in his mind at that time.
As Fitzpatrick has taken his own life, there will be no trial for the murder of Tom Noakes. There will, however, be an inquest for the death of both men, and it is hoped that the inquiry will bring a sense of resolution to the two grieving families. Manchester, England. In the early hours of the 26th of September, 2018, police are called to the Britannia Hotel after a man, 21-year-old Hayden Fitzpatrick, is seen jumping to his death from a 5th-story window. In his hotel room, police find the body of his colleague, 29-year-old Tom Noakes. Investigators determine Fitzpatrick killed Noakes in a drug and alcohol-fueled frenzy, using a magnum of Prosecco as the murder weapon before taking his own life. Separate inquiries will take place for the two deaths, and it is hoped they will bring resolution to their grieving families.
Hayden Fitzpatrick's decision to take his own life is obviously something that robbed Tom Noakes' family ultimately of finding out exactly what had happened to Tom. There must have been a very, very kind of rapid calculation from Hayden Fitzpatrick, if you like, that he had done something very, very extreme, presumably very, very out of character, and rather than face the music, if you like, and confess to what he'd done to try and get help for Tom Noakes, he decided that he was going to head further up into the hotel building and jump to his death.
We do have that one text when their phone was examined that he knew he'd done something that he could never forgive himself for in many ways. Well, you've got this flight situation. What do I do now? I'm not saying it was against his character, and there was certainly probably influenced heavily by the drugs and the alcohol. And this rage has come across him, possibly it might have been through jealousy. And then he realizes it's done. What do I do now? And he could see no way out other than taking his own life. And then you've got to understand that he's then picked up a fire extinguisher. So now it's being calculated. He's now thinking about, how can I take my own life? He's 5 floors up. So the only way he can really do that is by jumping off. The way I look at this is, you could have gone to the top of the hotel. You could have walked out the door. You could have jumped off in front of a train, even that time of the early hours of the morning. But he chose to smash a window. So I think there's a lot of rage still going through. But this rage had turned from rage against Tom, but rage against himself. The fact that he had let himself down. So this is going through his mind, and he just wanted to get out. So he smashed the window and took his own life.
Fitzpatrick's emotional state, he would have been in such a crisis. I mean, how do you process this? In a short space of time, you've killed your colleague from work, who it would seem you really liked, who you wanted attention from. And what does that mean for your future? You can't get away with it. You can't hide it. You're going to jail. Not only are you going to jail, but you're going to have to, at some point, sit in a room with the relatives of this man whose life you've taken. So you can imagine what kind of state he's in. He would have been panicking, maybe feeling regretful, feeling sorry for himself also, but he was feeling hopeless. And this is somebody with very little control of himself at this time. And so he deliberately breaks a window and he throws himself out of that window.
The inquest into Tom Noakes' murder takes place at Manchester Crown Court. The purpose is to finalise Noakes' cause of death and the legal outcome of this case, as well as conclude what would have happened if Hayden had not committed suicide.
The evidence in this case suggests that it's less likely to be a premeditated murder compared to a spur-of-the-moment murder. Importantly, if Fitzpatrick had been using cocaine, this can act as a disinhibitor to decision-making. It doesn't cause violence, but it can contribute to somebody making bad decisions in the moment, so it can affect their decision-making and contribute to that decision. It may have also contributed to his decision to kill himself after the murder.
What the actual inquest could have done was help the family of Tom to have some sort of closure in the sense of why. But of course what it has done is to be able to say, well, we know he's under the influence of drink and drugs. Whether that is now subjective, we don't know. But certainly what the coroner was able to say and what the police would said, he would have been charged with murder. Interesting there, because people would say, well, that wasn't premeditated, but that's what happens within the judicial system here. There will be an overall charge of murder, which can quite easily then in many ways be downgraded and accepted as a manslaughter plea. But what we have here, because he did take his own life, was the fact that the coroner and the police agree with the fact that he would have faced the murder charge.
Obviously, the telephone evidence would have been crucial during the inquest. Other things as well, toxicology reports, would have helped to add at least some context to this mystery.
After the inquest is finalised, Tom's family can try now to take whatever closure they can from it and hope to keep his memory alive.
It's incredibly hard to put yourself in the shoes of the victim's family, and that's probably doubly the case when they don't see somebody brought to justice and they're not able to get some kind of clarity or some kind of answer. There's obviously no answer that they're going to be happy with or that's going to bring their loved one back, but at least feeling like they've got some type of explanation as to why what's happened and how it occurred might give them some form of closure, which they've been deprived of in this case. But Tom Noakes' family spoke following the inquest into his death about the support they'd received from his friends, his colleagues and his loved ones, and I think they've taken a lot from just how kind of larger than life, charismatic and loving Tom was, and that love coming back to them as well.
The case into the murder-suicide is finally closed, but many unanswered questions remain for the families of the two men.
But the main thing the family felt, and especially the mother, was that, Hayden Fitzpatrick had robbed them of a son. And that's a huge impact on a family to go through this kind of trauma, not know why it's happened at the end of it, and not have anyone even prosecuted for it is also another thing where, people talk about this word closure. That word doesn't really exist within families that go through this. Certainly in my experience, it's another stage in their trying to cope with the death of a loved one. And after that inquest, of course, and still not having the answers that they wanted would be very, very difficult to take. And that family then will have to move on in Tom's honour, really, and in his legacy, and continue with their lives.
I think when you lose a loved one, particularly at the very prime of their life, as a parent you lose a son or a daughter, you as a sibling you lose a brother or a sister. I don't think you ever really have closure. We use these sort of opaque terms like closure as if you just move on with your life. I mean, grief follows you in forever and ever, I think. In court cases, you're sitting there listening to pathology reports and evidence, it's immensely involving, but then suddenly you're left with what? An empty bedroom, picture frames of loved ones and memories and bits of video, and you're reminded that they're not there all of the time. I think the court case ends and the media move on, but the families are left with the harrowing legacy of these appalling outcomes: murders, suicides, court cases. I think that you go over all of it in your head if you're a loved one. And whilst we can talk about closure, I don't think you ever have closure, particularly in a case as awful as this, where you've got somebody who never did any harm to anybody, wasn't violent, wasn't involved in any crime, they weren't in an abusive relationship, and they did no more than go on a night out, go back with a friend to a hotel room, and they were killed in the most sustained and remorseless way. Not only did you lose your loved one that night, but all of the answers to why you lost your loved one disappeared that night as well.
After the conclusion of the inquest, Tom's family released statements to the press about what kind of person he was and how they will never come to terms with his senseless death.
Tom was very, very loved by his family, and you can only imagine the extreme shock of finding out that your son, who has texted you during his night out to say, "Don't worry, I'm going to be home at some point." You think he's just out there enjoying himself, as young men do. And he's out with his work colleagues, so you think that he is safe. You've heard of Hayden Fitzpatrick. There's never been any kind of indication that he was a risk to Tom. So this comes out of the blue. And the hardest thing about it is that why did it happen? That question is never going to be answered. And so that is something that Tom's family and Tom's mother have to live with for the rest of their life. They will never get, any form of closure on that question. And they'll always be wondering, well, why? It's so senseless. Why did my son have to die? What could have been so important? What could have been the source of a conflict that could require somebody to be killed and then another man to take his own life? Would this conflict have mattered in 5 weeks, in 5 months, in 5 years? Probably not.
In April 2019, the body of a young British woman is found in a hotel in Switzerland.
Anna Reid was going away on this round-the-world trip.
Her father, as a treat for her for her 21st birthday, paid for her and gave her the finances.
For her, this was an adventure before going off to university, travelling to the United Arab Emirates,
Vietnam, Singapore,
Berlin and Germany, and eventually the Swiss Alps.
They go to a resort on Lake Maggiore,
staying at the extravagant Palmer au Lac.
Olive groves, fig trees. If you were shooting a Garden of Eden on film, you may well have said it there.
On April 9th, guests in the neighbouring hotel rooms hear a dispute coming from the junior suite.
There was a violent argument taking place.
People suggested that things like "you're killing me" or "you're kidding me" was being said.
They then hear screams, followed by a disturbing, eerie silence.
Paramedics were called, and the medics find Anna Reid dead in the hotel room.
The cause of death was asphyxiation and strangulation.
They found her in a bath of warm water to try and disguise the time of the death.
So what really happened in this luxury paradise on that fateful night? Lake Maggiore, Switzerland. On the 9th of April 2019, the body of a young female is discovered in Hotel La Palma au Lac in Locarno, Switzerland. She is identified as Anna Reid from England.
Anna Reid was a 22-year-old heiress from Harrogate in North Yorkshire. Her family owned a successful stud farm.
Guy Reid, her great uncle, had been pretty much a sort of self-made man. He had a transport business, he had an agriculture business, but his big love was horse racing, and he created a breeding operation there. Horses that were bred from that stable, that yard, were successful way beyond just the Reid's family ownership.
Anna had a sister called Millie, and together they attended the prestigious Asheville College, which cost around £10,000 per year.
Anna was what he perceived as a really nice girl, a kind girl, decent girl, hard-working girl. Even though she had fabulous wealth, out of the reach of most people, she had a job part-time in a restaurant, she babysat, she wanted to be a ski instructor, she'd already done 1 degree, and she was working hard to then go and do a maths qualification.
She had a lot of friends, she was interested in sports, she was interested in socialising and having fun.
Sadly, Anna's family had already experienced a great tragedy.
When she was 17, her life came crashing down when she lost her dear mother, Mary, at 49 years of age.
Her mum was coming to visit her in her new flat. At the end of that visit, she fell down the steps and had an aneurysm.
Anna was absolutely devastated.
That kind of bereavement in that sort of circumstance where someone will inevitably be feeling some degree of responsibility is going to have an impact. So it's not just the bereavement, but also that sense of, was there anything that could have been done differently?
And it's fair to say, and according to friends of Anna as well, that she went off the rails at that time. It was a very difficult time in her life.
When you suffer trauma, such as a loss of your mum, especially when it's so sudden, at an impressionable age 17, it will have an impact. And someone being described as going off the rails, actually to me is someone who needs some support, some treatment, and to be able to look at the trauma and really work with their feelings, because it really does affect you and your thought process and shakes up your whole life.
Her father, as a treat for her for her 21st birthday, a really significant birthday for her, paid for her and gave her the finances to go around the world for a year, travelling, going where she wanted to go.
Going away on this round-the-world trip for her 21st birthday was no doubt a treat for herself, but also a way of going out and enjoying life after a horrible, awful, sudden bereavement.
It was meant to be that summer was her last summer of freedom before she came down to reality and went back to the UK to resume her studies.
It is when Anna is travelling in Thailand that she meets her travel companion.
Anna's doing what many 21-year-olds do. She's going around the world, she's having one-off experiences, incredible memories, and she encounters Mark Schatzel. If you had to describe an individual that was more at odds with Anna's life, it's Mark Schatzel.
Mark Schatzel was 32 years of age. He was 10 years older than Anna. He was from southwest Germany. He had a past.
He was £40,000 in debt or thereabouts because of a failed company that he had owned.
Would dabble in drugs, would outspend his finances on designer goods.
He had a conviction for theft, he had drug rehab problems, he had issues with alcohol, he owed money all over town.
He had lapses in memory because of cocaine use.
And he had 2 children from a previous relationship for which he owed significant sums in child maintenance.
Mark Schatzel cut quite a thuggish figure.
He was a heavily tattooed man, a bodybuilder, and an ex-security doorman.
Quite aggressive looking tattoos. This was somebody who had warrior tattooed over his eyebrow. He had an upside down crucifix tattooed on his face, which projected a view of sort of anti-Christian, anti-good values.
The worrying ones were the ones that were initials FTW, the world, ACAB, all cops are bastards.
His social media handle was Mark Dirtywhite, Dirtywhite being the street slang for raw cocaine. It was also the name of a white supremacist group.
The Dirty White Boys are a white supremacist group within Germany. Why has he got these tattoos? Why is he calling himself this and affiliated to these groups? So, quite a concerning individual.
Previously, he had an assault conviction where him as a significantly bigger man had an encounter where a 17-year-old had bumped into him on a night out. The 17-year-old had apologised to him and gone to walk away. This was not enough for Schatzel. He lost his temper, and even though Schatzel's friends tried to hold him back, he chased down this 17-year-old, spat in his face and assaulted him. He was given a 8-month suspended sentence for this.
Clearly, he was not the type of partner that Anna's family would have envisioned her being with. Someone like Anna, a wealthy heiress, younger than him, was a perfect target for financial greed.
Mark Schatzel was the complete opposite of Anna in every sense, both in behaviour, appearance, physical characteristics, and also his criminal history. Anna came from a wonderful background, privately educated. She could ski, she rode horses, she was kind, decent, hard-working, multiple qualifications. Mark Schatzel was a nightclub bouncer, 10 years older than Anna. He worked manning the doors in different pubs, but also he wasn't just physically significantly bigger than Anna, he had significantly worse character traits than Anna.
Schatzel was actually really deceitful, and although he had got some money from a personal injury claim, which probably allowed him to dress in designer clothing and therefore made him validating for Anna, he didn't pay maintenance for his children, and that type of man, we know when they've got a history of convictions and they're controlling and domestic abusers, they generally won't care about their children, and they might even use their children to try and get back at their ex and control their ex.
But Anna, having met Schatzel while travelling, would have known very little about his background.
When the friends looked at him, they couldn't see them together, but Anna saw something in him that she liked, and they started a relationship.
Unfortunately, it wouldn't take long for Schatzel to show his true colours, having deadly consequences for Anna. In April 2019, the body of 22-year-old Anna Reid is found in the Hotel La Palma au Lac in Locarno, Switzerland. The British heiress had been on an around-the-world trip her father gifted her for her 21st birthday.
She started this relationship with him. When the friends looked at him, they couldn't see them together, but Anna saw something in him that she liked, and they started a relationship.
They had what we call a whirlwind relationship.
There was a bit of an age gap between them, I think around 10 years age gap, which is not that uncommon and not necessarily anything to be concerned about, but does give sometimes a dynamic of an older person having a bit more ability to take control.
Anna arriving in his life in Thailand was a golden ticket to enjoy a life that was way beyond his means. He immediately took advantage of that. Whilst he was charming and Anna clearly had feelings for him, he very much had feelings for her wealth. Her spending went extravagantly upwards to £10,000 a month, and a lot of that was being spent on Schatzel. It was fine dining,
bottles of champagne, drugs and alcohol. funding this lavish lifestyle that they were both indulging very heavily in.
It was clothes, it was things that Mark Schatzel could demonstrate he was suddenly rolling in money.
She was covering travel, accommodation, meals, all expenses, and that is one element of coercive control.
This man portrayed a completely different image to Anna. He told her that he was a successful company director, which wasn't true. He would have portrayed this image of success to Anna, who, remember, was 10 years younger than him. So he was wanting to impress this young woman to bring her under his spell.
I think he paid about 43 euros or something like that in those 3 months where she paid 50,000. You're seeing a massive imbalance in terms of finances, and that greedy, narcissistic person who Schatzel was playing on her vulnerability and her kindness and her joie de vivre.
Over a 3-month period, they travelled together.
They spent time travelling to the United Arab Emirates,
Vietnam, Singapore,
Berlin and Germany, and eventually they ended up in the Swiss Alps.
This really quick relationship would have been a red flag to someone who works in domestic abuse. Quick relationships that are very, very hurried are worrying, especially when you have this massive age gap between her and him, and polar opposite in terms of their backgrounds.
You couldn't have presented two more opposite characters to be in a relationship with each other. Anna was privately educated, slightly built, 22 years old, and Schatzel was the complete opposite. He was physically imposing, he was 10 years older than her. Anna was travelling on her own. It was probably quite useful to her. You know, you're travelling around, you're able to suddenly feel free as a woman travelling around. You've got this physically imposing guy, dangerous looking guy next to you. And this was somebody that was very, very different to the people that she'd have met at Royal Ascot or a private school in Harrogate or at York Racecourse. This is somebody that stood out, and he made sure he stood out, and he made sure that he carried this threat of violence.
When your friends and family can't see directly what is happening, they can't see how you are as a relationship, as a couple, they only just get messages from you. You know, it's very difficult for those people to intervene, to see that actually Mark Schatzel is becoming this coercive and controlling person who doesn't have control of the finances, but is doing very, very well to get the money off her anyway.
Soon, the picture-perfect holiday romance comes crashing down.
Things become dark when they go to Switzerland.
They go to a resort on Lake Maggiore, staying at a quite expensive hotel.
They stay at the prestigious Hotel La Palma Orlac in the foothills of the Alps.
This is a lavish luxury hotel. It was 4 stars, and they had upgraded themselves by renting the junior suite, which was far larger and was the superior suite in that hotel. So essentially they had the best room.
It's a small 68-room luxurious hotel. They spent a lot of money on the junior suite, room 501 on the top floor.
It's stunningly beautiful. It's called Lake Maggiore, but it's really a sequence of beautiful individual lakes. There's private islands on there with fantastic restaurants, glorious terraces. Everything's in this fantastic Italian architecture, stunning local geography, olive groves, fig trees. If you were shooting a Garden of Eden on film, you may well have said it there. This is an astonishingly beautiful place.
It's at this hotel that Anna receives a concerning message.
An ex-girlfriend of Schatzel's, who had been subjected to his violence and his controlling behaviour and aggression, actually contacted Anna's ex-boyfriend and explained that he was a dangerous man Anna's ex-boyfriend was able to tell Anna, I've been told that this guy is a liar, manipulative, he's violent, he's an offender, he isn't what you think he is. He really wanted to safeguard Anna. Anna might have started thinking at that point, ooh, how am I going to extricate myself from this?
Being so far away from family would mean that if there was issues in the relationship, it would be very hard for her. She would be in a very vulnerable position. She would not have anyone close by that she could talk to. She couldn't just get away from it very easily.
Anna had begun to recognise the dangers, and she had confided in friends and family that she was going to end the relationship.
Monday, 9th of April 2019 is when they went out to a restaurant. They travelled there by charter boat.
They go out for a suitably expensive dinner, £100 bottle of champagne is ordered, and they retire back to the room.
They arrived back to the hotel at 2:30 a.m, whereby shortly afterwards, hotel guests hear a situation developing, a violent row between the two of them.
Lots of sound of arguments, things banging around.
Furniture being knocked over, items being moved around. This sounds aggressive, this sounds like a problem. A guest reports that they were going to intervene, but they were frightened because of the noise of the row. We hear through witnesses that Anna is overheard shouting, "You're kidding me." It sounds very much as if she'd uncovered a horrible truth. Something had been uncovered, whether it was something about his past, whether he'd been stealing money from her, whether he'd been spending money on her credit card. She was very, very unhappy.
Witnesses in the hotel who heard a commotion thought they could hear the word money being said, so it could have been that things had come to a head in terms of the financial side of their relationship.
There was something really, really violent happening within that room at the time. The actual phone socket itself was ripped from the wall. The ability to communicate with downstairs had been taken away from Anna, with that phone being taken out of the wall.
2:30 in the morning, the guests are hearing this situation develop.
But these people were quite afraid to report it.
The more people see something, the less they feel like they have a duty to intervene or take responsibility. And that definitely plays an impact, even where it's not a direct bystander, so it's not somebody witnessing in the sense of seeing what's happening, but they're hearing what's happening. What other residents in the hotel have done is informed reception, which is quite understandable. And I would guess they would presume that the hotel then takes that responsibility of ensuring that this is nothing untoward. What reception have done is also assumed that somebody else holds that responsibility for their safety. We get the sense from how it's been talked about that the hotel guests who did report to reception did it in terms of the impact on them, rather than a sense of being concerned about the safety of Anna. Night porter goes up to the room to try and calm the situation down, clearly doesn't try and intervene, and it's not clear from the reports about who was spoken to at that moment that the night porter went up. Was it just Schatzl who was spoken to? Was Anna actually spoken to? Was Anna invited to come out of the room and have a conversation away from Schatzl? The reception intervention appears to have been around smoothing the waters for those other guests, not checking on the safety of Anna and checking what was going on.
Hotel staff return to their posts downstairs, but neighbouring guests hear the fighting coming from the room 501.
They then hear screams, followed by a disturbing, eerie silence.
Sometime after the shouting is heard, Mark Schatzl is heard crying loudly, but at that point nothing more seems to have happened.
4 hours later at 6:30 a.m, Mark Schatzl goes down to the hotel lobby
running into the reception and saying, Anna's not breathing, we need a paramedic, we need an ambulance.
Emergency services arrive on scene at Suite 501 at the hotel, where a deplorable sight awaits them behind the door. On April 9th, 2019, paramedics were called to a luxury suite at Hotel La Palma au Lac in Locarno, Switzerland, after reports of a guest in need of medical assistance. Mark Schatzel, a nightclub bouncer from Germany, alerted hotel staff that his girlfriend, 22-year-old British heiress Anna Reid, had stopped breathing.
At 6 o'clock in the morning, Mark Schatzel went down to reception of the hotel and reported that there was an issue with his partner.
Although Schatzel is playing the part of a partner gravely concerned for his girlfriend, suspicions begin arising for investigators.
They said he was frantic, they said he was worried, they said she needed medical attention to call emergency services, but it is worth noting that he was fully dressed, he had his socks and shoes on when he went down to report Anna being unwell.
He has taken the time to get dressed and to put on his shoes properly, so he's tied the laces, which to me does not suggest the actions of somebody who is panic-stricken.
First of all, hotel staff reported that Schatzel had somehow managed, in his frantic panic, to get up, put on all his clothes, including tying his lace-up shoes, getting the lift, walking out of the lift and coming down the stairs and asking for medical assistance. Imagine the love of your life is deceased next to you. You are going to get help. They are not breathing. Their tongue is sticking out. They are blue. You are stopping, putting on your clothes, tying your shoes, making sure you look good, and then getting the lift. Mark Schatzel is an athletic man. If your loved one is in distress, you are sprinting down those stairs. You are not pushing the button, waiting for the lift, tying your shoes, going down and seeking medical assistance.
But then he makes a shocking admission to paramedics.
Mark Schatzel denied murdering Anna Reid. He said that her death had occurred during a sex game gone wrong.
That the sex game had been initiated by Anna.
That he would cover up her mouth as they were having sexual intercourse, and that this was a form of erotic pleasure for her.
That she had asked for pressure to be applied round her throat.
A towel had been used around her neck.
He'd applied that pressure, and it was an accidental death resulting from that consensual sex and that consensual strangulation.
And he claims that she didn't give the signal that they had agreed upon to end what he claimed was erotic asphyxiation.
To be honest, whether consensual or not, she was dead, and he was not displaying anything that you would expect apparently at that time.
It's a relatively easy defence to make and a difficult defence to disprove.
This then is treated as a unexplained death or a murder inquiry at the time.
Law enforcement arrive on scene, and quickly Schatzel's excuse for Anna's death begins to crumble.
It was clear that there had been a physical intervention with things in the room. Given the verbal argument, given what was heard, and given the relative size of the two people, that it's more likely from the extent of the damage that it was Schatzel who had caused, if not all, but the majority of that damage.
Schatzel's demeanour quickly gains the attention of investigators on the scene.
A lot of things were revealed about Mark Schatzel's character and priorities when the police arrived. The police naturally take all Schatzel's clothes for forensic evidence. As he hands them over, he says to the officer, "Careful of those shoes, they're worth 1,000 Swiss francs." This is somebody who's just seen, he says, the love of his life, a woman he cares a great deal about, die in his arms. Anna's body is being taken out of the room on a stretcher. "Please be careful of my shoes, they're worth 1,000 francs.
Anna Reid underwent a post-mortem, and The pathologist there discovered that the cause of death was asphyxiation and strangulation, that she also had a number of defensive wounds, cuts and bruises.
In the post-mortem, she was found not only to have been asphyxiated, but there was bruising in her soft tissue, and there were microfractures in her bones. And the term microfracture could make people think that this wasn't a very serious kind of injury, but actually what it means is that rather than it resulting from a single kind of macro traumatic force, this is a repetition of force being applied to a bone. So it's about the circumstances of the fracture, not the seriousness of the fracture itself.
This shows that there has been contact between two people, and this is quite a violent struggle that has taken place.
They looked at elements of what had happened in her body, and rigor mortis had set in, so they were able to estimate that she had died a few hours earlier than him reporting the incident.
Schatzel is a serial liar, and he claimed that the phone had been ripped out of the wall, and that had happened before the murder. That's not true, because they had rung down for room service. When the room was looked at and Anna had been murdered, it did look like a violent assault murder had occurred, and that ripping out the phone obviously means that she's not able to contact reception.
It's a literal disconnection from the outside world.
Police quickly begin exposing Schatzel's lies and his dark character. They find Anna's credit card, which they've been using to lavish all kinds of things on Schatzel, hidden behind a panel in the hotel bedroom. Schatzel says he had hidden it from Anna as a joke. He had put it above the lift, and somehow it had fallen accidentally behind this panel.
Now, this was fairly significant because it indicates that there is a motive there, a potential motive, and what would be suggested later on is a financial motive, that obviously Mark Schatzel had no money, was spending no money. Anna had some £25,000 still in her account, and that credit card could be used to access that account.
The credit card was significant because there was £25,000 preloaded onto the card, so it was effectively free cash.
Although he claimed he hid it as a joke, to my mind there are probably easier ways to hide a credit card if it was a joke rather than what is really quite a difficult thing, particularly if you're not 6'2", which he is, but Anna Reid isn't.
I think there's two possible scenarios. One is that he hid it because it was a premeditated attack and he knew that he could then access that at a later date. The other one is that she had said she was going to leave him and he took the card from her, hid it, so that even if she did leave, he would have that card to access. He was losing control of her in the relationship, and he was also going to lose the financing of his lifestyle.
But will prosecutors be able to prove in court that Schatzel is a manipulative liar who killed Anna Reid in a furious rage once he could no longer control her and her finances? Mark Schatzel, a 32-year-old nightclub bouncer from southwest Germany, is on trial for the murder of 22-year-old British heiress Anna Reid from Harrogate in North Yorkshire. The young woman's body was discovered in a blood-stained bathtub in a luxury suite in the hotel La Palma au Lac in Switzerland on April 9th, 2019.
The trial of the murder of Anna Reid took place in October 2021 in Switzerland. First things first, what you see is Mark Schatzel turn up in what looks like a military uniform. He's wearing this military-style jacket with huge epaulets on. A really strange thing to wear as a defendant in a murder trial.
Schatzel couldn't deny that he'd been in the room when Anna died, but he used the defence that it was a sex game gone wrong.
His defence was the defence of the 50 Shades of Grey defence, that this was rough sex gone wrong. He said that they were experimenting with auto asphyxiation, that he was using a towel during this practice around her neck, and that she had died during this.
I think for me, the thing that stands out in the defence statement that Schatzel gives is he describes this as a banal accident. The use of that word banal is quite horrifying in many ways, as if this was not important, as if Anna's life was not important. And I think to minimise the actions as just a banal accident really kind of brings home how much he doesn't take responsibility for what has happened.
But prosecutors have spent thousands of hours building a case against Schatzel's defence.
In order for the prosecution to say that, well, these erotic games that Schatzel suggests that him and Anna were involved in were untrue, they went back to previous partners of Anna to say, is this anything that you ever did together?
Horribly for Anna's previous partners, they also had to go up and talk about Anna's preferences, and they said on her behalf this was something that she had never previously done or ever shown that she wanted.
Obviously very difficult conversations to have, but very important to show that this was not part of Anna's life, this was not something that she was involved in, and that the story that he was giving around that was an excuse to try and blame the injuries that she had on her towards that kind of accident, as he's suggesting it was her death.
This was a lie that horribly the Reed family, Anna's friends, and anyone who ever read a paper over that period also had to hear.
During the trial, the medical examiner stated that Anna had wounds around her gum area that indicated that a hand had been clamped at some point over her mouth. And we could say that was done when he was trying to prevent Anna from screaming. There was a towel found around her neck, so we know that is what Schatzel used to strangle her.
This defence of a sex game gone wrong has been used in many recent cases of domestic homicide.
18 cases in the UK, all involving violent men. They pled that it was a sex game gone wrong. I put my hands around their neck and they died in my arms.
On April the 9th, when Anna was murdered, the speculation is really around the fact that she had threatened to leave him on that day, and that's possibly the root to that argument. And that's because really the penny had dropped for Anna at that time. He was using her for the money. It wasn't a two-way relationship in any way financially whatsoever. Also, it was indicated that she'd been spoken to or contact had been made with her by a previous girlfriend of Mark Schatzel, saying that he's a dangerous man, he's a violent man, and he will use you for your money. So I think, when this all came together and she realised and probably sat back and thought, what am I doing? Then that's when she probably said it to him, and that's when, obviously, Mark Schatzel murdered Anna Reed.
If he was feeling that he was losing control, if she had expressed a desire for them to break up or part ways, then that will have been a precipitating factor. But I don't think this is a driving factor in the sense that almost like things are out of control. He very clearly has the control to not only kill her, but then to also put himself together before he goes down to reception to respond to the night porter. And I have assumed that it is Schatzel who opened the doors to the night porter. It would fit with that dynamic of control. But he's clearly been able to put something across to the night porter that it's not a big issue. So he's not being driven. This isn't out of control. This is very much in control.
Prosecutors call on forensic evidence in court to dispute Schatzel's defence that Anna's death was an accident.
Not only did he lie in court about the incident that led to Anna's death, he also lied about what happened after it. A pathologist demonstrated in court that Schatzel had somehow tried to disguise the reality of Anna's death and exactly when it occurred by putting her body in a bathtub.
What he'd done there is try to buy himself some time to try and confuse the forensic evidence that could be found externally and internally on her body.
He did it to take away any potential forensic evidence that the police could find that could point to what really happened.
There would be issues about how blood settles in a body once the heart stops beating. So the blood will settle at the lowest level. And that would indicate the length of time that somebody's heart had not been beating.
When the investigation looked at Mark Schatzel and Anna Reid and their relationship, especially around how things were financed in the travels, it was seen that Anna herself was spending over £50,000 on Mark Schatzel alone, let alone all the money that it would cost to travel and the cost of rooms in hotels. And when they looked at Mark Schatzel himself, astonishingly, they saw that he'd only spent £35 of his own money. So it showed that, you know, there's a serious imbalance in that relationship, and perhaps, you know, indicates why Mark Schatzel is with Anna in the first place, because she has all this money, and of course he has none. He has debts, he has drugs and alcohol problems.
And also her credit card being found in a panel in the hotel elevator just made no sense.
The prosecution argued that Schatzel knew that there was around $25,000 on this card. He would be able to hide the card and then retrieve it at a later moment with the view of going on the run or spending the money himself.
The prosecution suggested that Mark Schatzel was driven by his financial motive to get money out of and spend the remaining money on the credit card that Anna had and that he had placed in the panel, behind the panel in the lift, and that his debts and his use of drugs and alcohol were all part of this.
There is no doubt that that affluence that she has could well have attracted him. He maybe saw the lifestyle that he could have with her and get rid of his debts and have this relationship, but maybe a relationship where he could take control and use her resources to help him.
From the moment Schatzel took Anna's life, he showed no remorse or care for her. Not only did he perform this ridiculous facade in the hotel that she died in his arms in this sex game gone wrong, but throughout the court case, he was seen kissing his former partner who he'd reconciled with, the mother of his children, during court.
She had, prior to the trial, said to the press that she did not believe that he was guilty.
Now, you know, you're on trial for this horrific crime of a young woman who you say you thought a lot of and that you didn't mean to kill. Is it really appropriate to be canoodling with your ex-girlfriend during the breaks in the trial? I don't think so. It was just very bizarre.
He tried to project the view of the sort of loving family man, even though he owed many, many tens of thousands of backdated child support. This was someone that was happy to use the sort of veneer of respectability that the mother of his children gave him.
Mark Schatzel was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the murder of Anna Reid.
But Schatzel quickly sought to appeal the sentence, believing it was unduly harsh.
A few months later in 2022, he underwent an appeal, and the appeal was on the basis that they felt it should be manslaughter, and that was kind of, you know, an unsafe conviction. But actually what that resulted in was that they found that the sentence itself was unduly lenient and in fact increased his sentence by a further 6 months. So which kind of backfired on obviously Mark Schatzel's plans then to be released even quicker.
Despite successfully securing the murder conviction, the outcome does little to ease the suffering of Anna's loved ones.
It was very sad that this young woman, in her last summer of freedom, enjoying this gift that her father had given her before going off to university, couldn't just enjoy life. She couldn't just come home with a load of memories and a load of happy thoughts and happy experiences to share. It's just really sad that was taken away from her.
There is no sentence that will ever compensate for the death of another person. Anna Reid's family are probably never going to feel that any sentence would be enough.
I don't know what closure there ever is from families who suffer this sort of loss. Anna's mother had died at home very suddenly, and just as you come to terms with that horrible, sudden but natural death, your daughter, sister goes away on a trip of a lifetime, and you get a phone call suddenly saying that she's died, and then the man that's responsible for that, responsible supposedly to care for her, looking after her as a boyfriend, stands in court and perpetuates this lie that it was a sex game gone wrong, and you have to sit in an international court with all the media and press around you. I don't think you can ever overcome the trauma of finding out about her death, but also the lies that were perpetuated in court.
There is nothing that can bring her back, and there is nothing that can take back what he did.